Do you want to know David's secret? Well, stay tuned for the answer I'm about to tell you. Psalm chapter 31, we see David's life in God. What was his secret? How did he overcome his situations, his difficulty? He went through rough stuff. He was about to die. He had people chasing him. He had people hating him. How did he deal with this stress in his life? You want to know David's secret? Well, I want to divide Psalm 31 into 6 different parts. And there's 6 different aspects that we can learn through this psalm of what David did to overcome difficulty and hardship. Number 1, part 1, we see in verse 1 and 2 of Psalm 31, he cries to God for help. He cries to God. I think when we go through hardship, there's many things we can turn to. We can turn to food, we can turn to people, and we turn to these things to ease the pain that we're in. But David, he goes to the Lord. Psalm 31, verse 1, In you, O Lord, I have taken refuge. Let me never be put to shame. Deliver me in your righteousness. Turn your ear to me. Come quickly to my rescue. Be my rock of refuge, a strong fortress to save me. He begins with crying to the Lord. When you have problems, when you have hardship, where do you go? Who's the first responder? Where's the place that you go when you're in stress? David's secret is he went to God. We see that in Psalm 31. The first thing he does is he cries out to the Lord. Second part, verse 3 to 8, he is declaring who God is. He's reminding himself of who God is by declaring with his own mouth. And how does faith come? Faith comes by hearing of the word of God. And he is hearing his own mouth declare, reminding who God is. If you look, verse 3, Since you are my rock and my fortress, for your name's sake, lead me and guide me. He knows God. He has intimate relationship with God, and he's holding on to that. He's reminding himself of the covenant he has with God. And I think this is powerful. Married people, we have a covenant ring. And this is to remind ourselves of our relationship with God. This is what David was doing. He was reminding himself of the covenant he was in with God. And this is a powerful secret. When you go through hardship, remember who you're in covenant with. That's what David was doing in part 2. In verse 5, he says this, Into your hands I commit my spirit. The same thing Jesus said on the cross. How was David willing to commit his spirit? How was David even willing to do this and willing to say this? Because he was in deep covenant, intimate relationship with God. David was reminding himself of his covenant. That's number 2. Number 3, verse 9 to 13, we see David complaining. David was not suppressing his emotions, suppressing or belittling his hardship. He was really going through a hard time. He was really experiencing pain. Look at the words he's saying. He's saying, I'm in distress. My body, my eyes, my body, my soul is weak because of my sorrows. He's saying, verse 10, my life is consumed with this pain that he's in. He's saying his strength is weak. His bones are weak. He says his enemies are all trying to kill him. And there's people fleeing from him when he walks on the streets. He's complaining to God, saying, I'm suffering. I'm helpless. I'm hopeless. I'm rejected. I'm abandoned. And I'm hated. David did not suppress his emotions. Rather, he examined his own heart and he realized what he was going through. I think this is very healthy. It's not healthy to suppress your feelings and emotions. But what's important is, who are you going to give these emotions to? I live in an Asian country where many times people suppress their emotions. They suppress the way that they feel for the sake of peace, for the sake of not disturbing your neighbor. But David did not, he did not suppress his emotions. Rather, instead of, I'm not saying you need to go and tell the world your feelings and emotions and cause, disruption to people by sharing the way you feel. But what David was doing is he was able to examine what was going on in his heart and how he was feeling. This is a profound secret that I feel like we can all learn from David's life. Do you realize your emotions? Do you know the content in your heart? Do you know what you're struggling with? Or are you suppressing it all down? David was not suppressing it. He was letting it out unto the Lord. He was sharing with God his sufferings. And I think this is something that we need to practice. Instead of going to people and complaining to people, instead of venting to people, go to God and share with God your heart. Share with God how you're feeling. Share with God your emotions. Share with God the wounds in your heart, the pain that you're feeling from the stress that you're in. And I think this is a powerful thing that David did. The fourth one is from verse 14 to 18. David is praying a prayer of deliverance, and once again, he's reminding himself of who God is. He's saying, verse 14, "But I trust in you, O Lord. I say you are my God. Many times, my times are in your hands. Deliver me from my enemies and from those who pursue me. Let your face shine upon me. Save me in your unfailing love, in your loving kindness." He is pleading with the Lord after sharing his complaints. He's not ending the conversation with complaints, but he's reminding himself of the covenant relationship once again. And then the fifth section is we see David going back to praising God. Verse 19 to 22. "How great is your goodness, which you have stored up for those who fear you, which you bestow in the sight of men on those who take refuge in you. In the shelter of your presence you hide them. From the intrigues of men in your dwelling you keep them safe from accusing tongues. Praise be to the Lord, for he showed his wonderful love to me. When I was in a besieged city, in my alarm I said, I am cut off from your sight. Yet you heard my cry for mercy when I called to you for help." David had a history with God, and he held on to that history. He held on to that covenant relationship. And David, time after time after time, he experienced God's unfailing love, God's kindness. That led David to continue to seek God and hold on to God. And the last section, the sixth thing that I want to share with you today is verse 23 and 24. David commands people, exhorts people to worship God. Verse 23, 24, "Love the Lord, all his saints. The Lord preserves the faithful, but the proud he pays back in full. Be strong and take heart, all you who hope in the Lord." David is now speaking to us, to every person that's going to hear this song, every person that's going to read this text. He's saying, remember who God is. Remember the covenant. Remember what happens to those who take refuge in him. They will never be put to shame. So if you are going through hard times, be strong and take heart, all you who hope in the Lord, because God is faithful. And learn from David's life. David's secret is this: he took refuge in the Lord and experienced the power of God. This was David's secret. God bless you.